Hey everyone, my name is Azure O'Neill. I am Overland Expo's Director of Logistics, and I am honored to have such an amazing group of people with me today to chat about all of our travels to Alaska. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Bill and Pam to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their journey.
I'm Bill Elwell.
And I'm Pam Standley.
And we've been traveling together for quite a while now, and I'm going to share a quick screenshot here of what our rig is. So we're currently retired and built this rig to travel with, four-wheel camper on a Dodge Ram, towing an adventure trailer that we had. Kind of brings our toys along, extra fuel, extra water, outside cooking, things like that. It's served us well. We've been in that in 5 years now, and that picture is in Alaska crossing the Brooks Range on our way up to the Arctic Circle.
We're past the Arctic Circle there. That's on the way to Dead Horse.
Got it. So we left from Houston, hightailed it out of the hot weather, 3 days to Canada, and then slowed down our pace. So 4,000 miles to get to Alaska. And in Alaska, we covered 4,000 miles, kind of running clockwise around the state, hitting the coastal cities there. So that shows our circle around the state, a lot of things along the coast and then up to the Arctic Ocean. And then when we were done, rolled it all the way back. And that's it for us.
Hi, my name is Maggie McDermut. I travel in a very tiny 1986 BJ70 Land Cruiser with my dog, who's currently sleeping downstairs, so I won't bug her. I did my Alaska trip in 2018. I covered the Dalton and the Dempster Highway, and the whole trip ended up being about 20,000 miles total in 3 months, covering pretty much every drivable area in Alaska minus the Denali Highway, and then pretty much every drivable area in the Yukon, a good chunk of British Columbia, and then a good section of Western Alberta as well. So I covered a lot of Canada and most of Alaska that you can.
Amazing. Mike, do you want to go ahead and tell us about yourself?
Sure. As we talked about earlier, I was born in Fairbanks in 1954 when it was still a territory. We moved from there, but I've been back multiple times. Back in 1980 for a backpacking trip into Denali, and then in the late 90s for climbing in the Ruth Gorge and over in the Yukon on Mount Logan. And then the Army sent me back from 99 to 04. I was stationed up in Fairbanks, and then went back again in 09 after I got out of the Army. And we just flew to Fairbanks, or to Anchorage rather, rented a car, did our driving around, and then flew back. And then most recently last year, we did like Maggie did, took about a 3-month trip and drove a truck camper up through Canada and over to Alaska and then back down. And I think we covered about 11,000 miles, but we went all the way back down to California and then back home to Colorado.
So quite a long history with Alaska for you.
Yeah, it'll do that to you.
I can't wait to get back. Yeah, I was up there quite a bit ago now. It was summer of 2014 on a 1989 Honda Transalp, and spent, I would say, 99.9% of the time camping, and it rained probably 90% of the time. So it was a bit of a different experience, but absolutely beautiful. Can't wait to get back myself. So our panel today will be covering questions that have been generated from some of our followers on Instagram, on Overland Expo's Instagram account. So Captain Mac 251 wants to know everything about Alaska. So figure we better get started. One of the questions you always hear, and Mark Jacobson posed this one, is what are some must-go places in Alaska? And I'll add to that, since all of us journeyed through Canada to get there, if you want to talk about some of your favorite places in Canada as well, that would be great. Mike, we'll go ahead and get started with you on this question if you'd like to tackle it first.
Well, I think it would take quite a bit of time to answer that fully, particularly when you include Canada into the equation. But for me, I think going through Alberta and along the ice fields parkway, absolutely gorgeous. Do know that when you go from Jasper to Whitehorse, there's absolutely no good coffee. So you better bring your own if you want good coffee. And then in Alaska itself, there's so many places. I'll stick to just a couple. One, obviously, is Denali National Park. And factor in much more time than you might think you need there, because you'll never see another place like that in the entire world. Along with that, I would go down the Kenai Peninsula, down to either Seward, which has an excellent marine aquarium that you should visit. Ample, they got like 400 or 500 camping sites there, right along the water. And then maybe Homer also. If you go into Fairbanks, I would go to the University of Alaska at Fairbanks, because they have a top-notch museum in there that's well worth the trouble and the time to see of Alaskan history. So that would kind of be the three big places for me, and I'm sure others will add more.
Sure, already listening to your list, I know I have some overlap, but Maggie, do you want to go ahead?
I definitely have some overlap. And besides kind of the big names of the Dalton and the Dempster highways, Cooper's Landing, which is kind of central Kenai Peninsula, that is an amazing area. And then Dawson City, Yukon is not overhyped. It is well worth a visit. It is such a funky, weird, cool town. With one of the best coffee shops that I've been to, and I'm pretty sure it's the only coffee shop there, so just Google coffee in Dawson City. And then I would say don't discount the Stewart-Cassiar Highway. I did the Stewart-Cassiar, which is on the western side of British Columbia, up. It is gorgeous. It's not, I think, it's not talked about as much compared to the Alcan, so definitely look at the Stewart-Cassiar Highway.
Yeah, we did this through a Cassiar Highway as well. And I just remember these remarkable stretches of wildflowers on the side of the road, but also a lot of potholes. So that was—
And bears.
Yes, and lots of bears, which I was like, you know, little bear cubs, as long as you're far enough away and mom stays where she is, or that's great. Bill and Pam, what do you think?
All great spots. We had a few others. I'm gonna try the share screen again and see what we. Okay. One of our highlights back in the Wrangell St. Elias was a flight seeing trip. Had one of those picture postcard days. Spent 2 hours in this plane, just dropping into valleys, looking at glaciers. It was one of the most spectacular things that of our trip, I think, for both of us. Homer down on the Kenai Peninsula, camped out there for a couple of days, did some fishing, cycling, really neat spot. Iditarod Museum, and you get to meet some sled dogs and go for a ride in a wheel cart. That was pretty cool.
That's just north of Anchorage.
Yeah. We had brought inflatable kayaks, so we took every opportunity to get out on protected water. A lot of these glacial lakes and things. So that was pretty cool, getting out where nobody else was. Hiking on glaciers, lots of opportunities. Nothing technical for us. This was an easy one out back in Wrangell, St. Elias. We didn't go where nobody else had been. We were in sight of solid land and other people most of the time. So nothing too crazy. And the Kennecott Mine, again in Wrangell, St. Elias, just awesome that this dates back to the 30s and 40s, and it's still there, and you can tour through it and learn the history of the mining back in there. Fishing, I'm a fisherman. I caught plenty of fish. It's hard not to catch fish up there, so we enjoyed that part of it. Tours, boat tours to see wildlife, so we did a little bit of that.
Valdez in general was one of our favorite little towns. There was so much to do there. It was so pretty and just a surprise, and we enjoyed it.
And we did the Dalton up to the Arctic Ocean and the Haul Road. So just surviving that experience and seeing all there is along there, not just making the Arctic Ocean, but see all the sights along the way and getting everything covered in mud.
Yeah, it was fun to watch the caribou hunters running after the caribou as they figured out where the hunters were. They're running across the tundra trying to chase the caribou.
So that's actually, you brought up the mud with the Dalton. And as a motorcyclist, we took a lot of care with our bikes, prepping them before we did the ride up the Dalton. And then we spent a lot of time cleaning them on the way back. Did any of you take any special care with your vehicles with that road?
I should have. My experience on the Dalton wasn't too bad with mud. There was only a few sections on my way back down that got a little bit rainy. But on the Dempster, if I could just use this as a segue to the mud on the Dempster, I had a day that was about 800 kilometers of just pure 1.5 foot thick mud. That was really rough to get through and deal with. But I also, when I came back down to Colorado, I didn't go home and I went straight to an event that was all about, the high elevation passes here, off-road passes. And I had a really big problem with like borderline overheating because my radiator was so caked with mud. So if people go up there, I saw a lot of people put like bug screens in front of their radiators. Do that because it also helps with the mud as well. So that was definitely a problem.
Good point.
Yeah, we did the prep with the bug screens and 2 of them, a big coarse one on the front to stop the rocks from coming up under the windshield, and a finer one in front of the radiator for the mosquitoes and small bugs. But we saw the exhaust pipes, even with a diesel truck, it's got a pretty big exhaust pipe, but that mud, it dries and cakes, and there wasn't much open when we got all the way up to the north slope, and we had to actually chisel the mud off of the exhaust pipe.
I broke my exhaust pipe off on the Dalton.
It was the extra weight of the mud.
Yeah.
They ended up welding it in Prudhoe Bay, so I was really lucky with that. But it was definitely hanging on with the clothing hanger for a while.
Pays to have some creative problem solving in your back pocket. Huh? So the next question that we have is from Jared Crown, JCrown7. And he wanted to know, is getting from the lower 48 and through Canada as easy as having the right paperwork and cooperating at the border? Obviously, right now, things are very different, but what were your experiences? And hopefully we'll assume that we'll get back to kind of a more normal operation at some point in the near future.
Crossing into Canada was really easy, and I actually had my dog with me too, so I had all of her papers and her vaccines, because according to Canadians, their government website, you have to have their rabies vaccine proof of that, and they pretty much were like, I don't want to see that, don't worry, but have it just in case. And I actually had a bigger struggle crossing back into the US, which I found a little bit funny. So as long as you have your paperwork and you have everything in order, going between the US and Canada is usually really easy.
Because that was kind of our experience, going into Canada. We stopped at the border. They wanted to inspect the truck and the trailer because it was unusual and different. It took them a while because they wanted the keys. They don't want you by the truck while they're doing their inspection. So they said, you got the keys, and Bill's got this chain of keys. It's probably got 15, 20 keys for all the different compartments and doors. And about 10 minutes later, he comes in and, can you come open the camper door for me? He looked in there and said, okay, you're fine. But, it took a while, and they had to go through our paperwork and passports and check all that stuff. But because we'd never been to Canada, or it'd been years and years. So. But it was, it wasn't any real problem. It just took a little while, and then we rolled on. And coming back into the States, they cared more about the fruit and vegetables that we had and whether you had any wood or sticks. And we had a couple pieces of fruit or apples that we had to leave. And we could bring our grapes, but they couldn't be on the stems. So we took all the grapes off the stems and brought them in.
Okay.
Woody product, I guess.
Yeah.
Never mind the seeds.
Yeah.
Mike, do you have any experience with this to share?
Yeah, it's kind of unique, I guess, in several ways. My wife is from Mongolia, So she's a foreign national. She's here on a permanent resident visa. And of course, she traveled with me last year. And we had absolutely no difficulty with either mine or her passports or visas. We have a dog, a Bernese mountain dog. Like Maggie mentioned, no problems with that. I brought a shotgun. There's forms you fill out. You can get them from the Canadian Firearms website. As long as you've got your ducks in a row and all the serial numbers match up and it's a legal weapon, then it's just a matter of them checking things off and you're good to go. So at any rate, it was a very easy process. I had a lot of anxiety beforehand, giving all those different considerations, but it turned out to be all for naught. They processed us, very friendly. And we crossed in Montana, going up into Alberta. I can't remember the town or whatnot, but yeah, very, very few people there, just kind of went right on through.
It's probably where we came back into the States through that same passage through Montana.
No, when we were there was a van that had several kayaks strapped on it, hardshell kayaks, and they were being held up. They'd been working all the way up from South America, so they wanted those boats inspected, and the wildlife guy was 3 hours out, so they were just sitting around waiting to get their kayaks inspected.
I don't say it's pepper spray, say it's bear spray.
Yeah.
And make sure the can says it's bear spray.
Yep.
And then it's fine.
Otherwise, you're not allowed to bring pepper spray into the country.
Right. Right.
So that's actually a great segue for our next question from Taylor Gonzalez, asking if rooftop tent camping is a horrible idea, and what are all of the tips for bear safety? Maggie, do you want to take a stab at that?
So I don't have a rooftop tent. My car is tippy enough. I actually sleep in my vehicle and usually do even when I'm traveling down here. Part of that is a safety aspect as being a solo female traveler. I like to lock all my doors. I do travel with a backpacking ground tent just so if I'm traveling like for a long time, I can set that up, and really it's for kind of getting my dog out of the car, getting a different experience for her. And I did use my ground tent in Alaska a few times. The areas that I used that in, I wasn't in kind of my usual remote backcountry spots. Those were more established campgrounds, and most of my Alaska, Canada trip, I really stayed in more established campgrounds just to have more people around. Oftentimes there'll also be bear boxes, and that's a consideration as well. I did have bear food bags, so I could hang my food if I needed to, and they were bear proof in the sense that like a bear could bite the bag, but it wouldn't rip the bag. REI, that was where I went for that. But I definitely changed and adjusted how I normally camp to accommodate the fact that there is going to be, well, just more bears than, let's say, camping in Colorado or something like that.
Bill and Pam?
I guess we were in a truck camper, so from a camping standpoint, we were, fairly secure, from the animals. But we had bear spray that we carried with us, anytime we were outside the vehicle, unless we were in a town. But
if you get bear spray, not only do you get the canister, you have to have a holster or something so you can actually have it with you all the time, not in your backpack.
Yeah, it doesn't do you any good if it's packed away in your pack, because you won't be able to get it in time. It needs to be on your hip where you can just pull it out. We never saw a bear the whole time we were in Alaska, so we didn't need it, but it's because we had the bear spray, I'm sure.
And plus, keep a clean camp. The trailer we cooked outside off the trailer. The trailer's metal and lockables. The trash went inside the back of the trailer, not in the camper with us.
Yeah, we kind of had a portable bear box that we travel with. So,
yeah.
Could I add something on that really quick?
Uh-huh.
Don't use a trasharoo. I know trasharoos are a big thing kind of in our community, and they're great when you're not in an area with wildlife like bears. So just to throw that out there, I traveled with mine, but it didn't hold trash. It held an oil catch pan, so I could change my oil on the road. So if you see people with trasharoos in Alaska, hopefully there's not food or trash in there, and there shouldn't be. So just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry to jump on you, Bill.
Yeah,
I
we
think
used our trash chute the same way. It carried firewood and wet stuff, and no trash, no food.
Yeah.
right.
And the rooftop tent, we've got one. We traveled for years in that. Just in that climate, you could get in. Azure can attest to many wet days. So, for our trip, we were going to be up there for a couple of months. We wanted the more comfort of the enclosed thing, but we saw plenty of cycle tourists, motorcyclists, in ground tents. A few rooftop tents. It's just your comfort level.
What do you think, Mike?
My take on the rooftop tents, like Maggie mentioned, as long as it matches your vehicle and doesn't change the dynamics of it to where it becomes overly top heavy, it gives you a lot of mobility and a relatively secure place to sleep off the ground at night. I've slept dozens of nights in Alaska in a tent and never had much of a worry at all. I would say bear-wise, most of it's just common sense. Keep a clean camp. If you're going to cook 100 meters away from where your tent is. Don't leave any food laying out. Don't bring any food into your tent. Pretty much those sort of things. I mean, people like, even myself, I brought a shotgun along. Other people bring bear spray. The key is to avoid. Stay alert, aware of your surroundings, pay attention to what's going on around you. The bear-proof containers for food items are great. They work, I'd say, about 99% of the time. But again, store them away from your campsite or in a hard-sided vehicle of some sort.
I'm the only motorcyclist of the group and slept in a ground tent for all but, I think, 2 nights that we were in Alaska. Most of the time that we were camping, we got rained on, and we just got really creative with finding ways during the day to stop and take a rest when the sun came out and dry all of the camping equipment. When it came to bear safety, that was something that we were definitely very cognizant of. And we had fortunately met up with a friend just on our way up through Canmore, and he was a outdoor wildlife expert and kind of gave us all these different tips and tricks and advice on bear safety and animal safety in general in Alaska, because of course it's not just bears you have to be worried about, it's moose and so on and so forth. So we always had what's called a bear banger in the tent with us in addition to the bear spray. And so bear banger is basically like looks like a pen, but it's a small explosive device, and essentially you want to set it off. If you see a bear's coming towards you and you feel threatened, you want to set it off kind of like behind you so that the bear runs away from you. You don't want to set it off and point it towards the bear, because if you do that, it'll go off behind the bear and it might scare the bear towards you. The other thing he told us about pepper spray, or about bear spray rather, is that bears actually like bear spray after the initial spray. So they have on film, I guess, people sprayed a bear who was on their front porch and being aggressive, and the bear ran away, and they had one of those security cameras, and the bear actually came back a few hours later and rolled around in the area that the bear spray had been sprayed, almost like a cat with catnip. So the advice he gave us was that if you do have to deploy your bear spray, to make sure that you exit the area immediately afterwards, because that bear might be coming back. The next question that we have is from, I think, Kansas R2. How much fuel range should my rig have? Bill and Pam, do you want to tackle this one first?
Sure. I think in general, 200 miles covers you. If you're going to go up the Arctic Circle, you probably want to have 3. First rule of traveling up there is don't pass up a gas station. Yep. We came across one family in a Jeep Cherokee that was waiting for the gas tanker to come in. They had stretched so they could make this one station. The station was out of fuel. They were waiting on a tanker. So they spent 6 hours there waiting on the tanker. Fortunately, we needed diesel and not gas, and they had diesel in stock. So we filled up and moved on. But don't let your tank get empty. We have 600-mile range the way we're rigged out, but we always had spare if you want to go exploring off to the side. general touring, 200 minimum. Arctic Ocean, probably 3, and more is better.
Could I hop on there?
Go for it, Maggie.
Yeah, Bill got it pretty nailed. Like, if you see a gas station, it doesn't matter how expensive it is, just go. Especially when you're up in the Arctic. It's the Dalton and the Dempster. There's plenty of fuel stops. My range that I had to consider, which I didn't really plan my trip. I just kind of let it happen, but I know my vehicle really well. So I knew my vehicle's range, and I carry 4 extra gallons, which is plenty for my little rig. I had to have a range of about 400 miles when I did the North Canal Road, because it's about 200 up and 200 right back down. And there's absolutely no fuel stops. There's nothing on that road. So if you want to get even more remote than just like the Dalton and the Dempster, do know your vehicle mileage, not just like, you have to know how big the gas tank is and what your average MPG is at various, rates, whether you're highway, whether you're in first gear all day, low range. So just knowing your vehicle is really the best part of that equation to help you kind of resolve that.
Okay, Mike, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd agree with Bill. I never let the tank get below half a tank, and that usually gave me a couple 100 miles. But I found this.
Yeah.
See it there, the milepost?
Yep.
Everybody knows this. If you don't, you should. You should get a copy. Almost all of these questions are going to be addressed and probably adequately answered in this one booklet, as well as how far it is between each fuel stop. How many miles to the next lodging, where can I get propane, where are the hot springs, et cetera, et cetera. So
The other thing we found was we picked up local brochures. This was one on the Dalton.
Yeah.
And it's got specifically for it, what services are where, how far apart they are. And, on the Dalton, the longest stretch from Cold Springs up to Dead Horse is 250 miles. And there's nothing between those 2 spots. So getting the local information, local brochures, the milepost has got a huge amount of information, but these other brochures, they get put out every summer, just like the milepost, but not quite as much information, so you can digest it a little quicker and easier. But yeah, talk to locals about the road conditions and, fuel opportunities and everything, because they're going to know what's going on. And, sometimes gas stations are written up in the books, but by the time you get there, they're closed or they don't have gas. And so you want to get the most current information you can, especially if you're going out into remote areas.
Yeah. Could I jump on a small tangent, Azure?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Pam just said it too. Talk to locals. That was one of the biggest things I did. I'm a big coffee person. I'm a big beer person. I go to all the local coffee shops and all the local breweries. You won't find me at a Starbucks when I'm on a trip. I'm at the hole in the wall spot. And it's a slightly different dynamic because I'm traveling by myself. People seem more interested in talking to you, kind of, seeing what your trip is about. But I learned so much about the places that I was going through just by talking to locals and taking the time to talk to them. Or just at some of those remote gas stations. I got a tip about an angry bear on one of the roads that I was going to drive from the gas station attendant, because we were just chit-chatting away, and I told her I was going to go do the North Canal. And she told me about this bear at this one mile. She was like, it's there every summer. It's at mile marker XYZ. Don't stop there. And right when I drove through that area, I saw a bear. So it's, don't discount those sorts of interactions. It can be a little bit different if you're in a group of people. That just changes the dynamic of meeting some locals, but definitely take that information in when you can.
We met a lot of locals in the grocery store parking lots.
Yep.
They'd see our rig and wonder what we were up to and start chatting with us, and then start telling us about, well, there's this really cool spot to camp along the riverside. If you go up this road past the 3rd bridge and take a right, go down the dirt road. And we followed a lot of those directions to some really cool spots that, you wouldn't have a clue is out there. And so you get a lot of good information from locals, car dealerships that we stopped at for truck maintenance, gave us tips, and so yeah, they're a wealth of information, and they're all happy to talk to you. They want to hear about what you're doing and share what they know.
Everywhere you go, talking to the locals is the best way, I think, to plan your trip. They'll they want you to have a great time in their home, and they'll give you the best advice in order to do that. You guys have touched on maps a bit. Did you guys primarily use maps? Did you use any GPS? Mike, I know you have your map book, and we did too. Did you use any GPS while you were traveling in Alaska, or just stick to the paper maps?
Yeah, I always prefer paper maps anyway, even if we're out climbing or something. I just like them. So we never use a GPS. Never had any difficulties.
What about you, Maggie?
I travel with a Garmin InReach, but not for the GPS. That's more just to ping my mom to tell her I'm okay, or else things don't go well. I'm a big paper map believer. National Geographic has their Trails Illustrated series. In most national forests, most national parks, most public lands have a Nat Geo Trails Illustrated. Those are great. Also, I guess Garmin bought Deloitte, but all my atlases are Deloitte because they're so old. Big believer in atlases as well. Again, that's just a security thing too. If I'm relying on technology and it fails,
what do?
You're kind of stuck. So if you do rely on GPS and electronic devices, have a backup of a paper map.
Well, one of the things to consider, if you're using your phone as your GPS, you're going to have some real issues up north because there are so many not covered areas that you can't get in touch with anybody. So yeah, we kind of cover the whole spectrum. We carry an InReach for emergency communications, which we've never had to use, but it also allows our friends and families to track where we are. And if they notice that we're not moving, that might be a warning sign to them that something's going on. But and then we have a Garmin GPS,
street navigation.
Yeah, and then we have handheld GPSs that we use for hiking, and then we have the whole complement of road maps and atlases and all that because we just like all of it.
It's good to have your bases covered. I'm a
Yeah.
big believer in that too. Yeah.
Yep.
Next question we have is from Mitchell Stegman. Would you do it again? And what changes would you make to your vehicle to make it better? I think we've already kind of covered that question a little bit, Maggie, with the fly screen and the radiator, but does anyone have anything they want to add to that?
First answer is yes, we would do it again.
Me too.
Yeah, we had talked to quite a few people before we went, so we went pretty well prepped as far as, we got no broken windshield because we had the front armored, the radiator was protected.
Headlights were protected.
Prepare to spend a lot of money at car washes if you want to get all that mud off.
Mike, what about you?
Oh yeah, we're going up next summer. We'll have a different vehicle. We ordered up if it gets here, we ordered a Sprinter van for a number of different reasons, but mostly because it offers more space inside, more usable space inside than the truck camper that we currently have does.
Nice. I can't wait to see your pictures from that one. That'd be great. Maggie, what about you?
Yes. I love Alaska and I love the Yukon. I would spend every summer there if I could. In terms of changing my vehicle, no, I absolutely love my car. It's not for everybody. It's a super tiny 4-wheel drive vehicle that I barely fit in. But at most, the biggest changes I'd make is just how I packed. But I wouldn't change anything particular in terms of how I've outfitted my vehicle, which is pretty much not, because I love it and its capabilities in its stock form. I have a roof rack, but it does its job and it does it really well.
For me, I don't think I would change anything. I love my motorcycle. Like you, Maggie, it's everything is pretty well stocked on it, except for the luggage, of course. And it did a phenomenal job, even given its age. I think the one thing that I always try to advise motorcyclists to consider is when we rode up the Stewart-Cassier Highway, we had a ton of rain and it was super cold. So we took a day out of our travels. We spent 12 hours on our hands and knees in a burned forest picking morel mushrooms. And we wound up earning enough money through that experience that one day to pay for a ferry passage from Alaska back down to kind of a southern section of Canada. It was a beautiful experience. It's not something that I think a lot of people who overland to Alaska really think about doing, because the whole point is driving your vehicle. But we really loved it, and got to see whales, and it was great to have the perspective of seeing that beautiful area from the sea rather than by land. So that was a cool thing to do. I would probably do that again.
I actually ferried from Whittier to Valdez, so 8 hours across the Prince William Sound. Highly recommend.
Yeah, when I went back up, when the Army sent me back up to Fairbanks, they were kind enough to pick up the tab for taking the ferry out of where the Anacortes and up in Washington State all the way up to Haines, Alaska. Mm. I thought it was a great experience. And the ferry will even let you come on as a foot passenger and camp, sleep on the deck. So you don't have to get a room or anything like that. So that's kind of an advantage. And you can get off, like say you want to get off and catch a can or Juneau, drive your truck off, your vehicle off, and then catch it again and finish your journey. Gives you some options.
With that, I'll ask you guys, do you have anything else you would like to add today before we wrap it up?
Don't over-engineer your trip. I feel like Alaska and Canada both lend themselves to kind of letting a trip organically happen. Pair yourself with information, but talk to locals and see where they take you. That was definitely one of the highlights of my trip.
I agree.
I would add.
They do sell food up there. You don't have to bring everything for a month. There's people that live there and you can buy supplies. Resupplying was not a problem at all.
I would add to that, you guys, the only campground reservations I made for the entire trip going up and back were at Denali National Park. And there you can make them as far out as 6 months before your scheduled dates. And I would encourage you to do that because they do fill up fast. We traveled again from late July to early October overall, and never had any problems finding a campground, whether it was a fixed sort of campground or just a pull off in the road. Never any difficulties whatsoever. So kind of like Maggie said, just let it go. The milepost is a great reference, and use it. Enjoy it.
What we found on the camping spots was if you stop early, even if you're going to the campgrounds, you'll get a spot. If you wait till late in the afternoon, evening, campgrounds fill up. So we would stop early, go paddling in the lake or go for a hike or a bike ride, enjoy the area. And early means 2 or 3 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And you'd have time to enjoy the spot and you'd get a spot. And we only had, I think, the one reservation at Denali that we made kind of last minute because it was like, oh, wait, we're going to stay here a night if we can get a spot. And we were able to. So we stayed pretty loose. We didn't have a tight schedule. So yeah, that's the way to do it.
Perfect. That sounds great. Well, thank you all so much for joining today and chatting. It's been really a pleasure. I certainly look forward to seeing everyone in person next year at Overland Expo.